All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I would say it's always an honor, and I'm usually pretty glad to speak to you, but the topics don't really put a smile on my face. Certainly the image you're seeing right now on your screen wouldn't do that unless your heart was made of stone. That somewhat Dickensian-like scene from February 5, 2 days ago, in Gaza, hungry children trying to get a little food, and this is the humanitarian crisis, the failure of the Gazans to be able to feed themselves and secure their the necessities of life, the bare necessities, because of the ongoing bombing, the barrage by Israel. Now close to 30,000 dead, I think, confirmed by Al Jazeera. And there's no question that the moral atrocities by Israel are putting a moral imperative on our institutions to do what they can to stop it. And certainly, I'm trying. I mean, I don't have a lot of power. I don't have a lot of influence. I wish I did. That's why I'm doing this, is to hopefully put together a collective voice to stop the killing around the world where we can do so. And we do have, I believe, in this country, with the political will and leadership to do it, we could stop this. But there is no such political will. And in fact, to the extent there's a political will, it would seem to be pretty much on the other side to perpetuate the death, the destruction that Israel is raining down on the Palestinian people. That caption, "As the crisis deepens, Congress plays games," really reflects the farcical efforts by the Republican Party to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, which failed, but which ultimately will probably will be somewhat successful. They'll get some kind of bill of impeachment that will certainly not go anywhere in the Senate. And also the responses by the Democrats are absurd. I mean, my Congress member, Jamie Raskin, embarrasses himself, I believe, on the floor of the House a few days ago in an exchange with Marjorie Taylor Greene. What saddens me even more, though, than the kind of bullying and, sort of snotty, smart-ass behavior, that smirking behavior that Raskin engages in, and I'll show you the video, but that I think so many of his constituents, people who I assume are somewhat aligned with me politically, will be like, "Attaboy, Jamie, you go get her." I mean, that's where we are. We've got this score-settling mentality. Can you own the other side? Not, how do we solve problems? And I'm here to try to rally people behind solutions. And right now, there's no solutions in Congress. There's two parties that are bound and determined to settle scores against each other when they're not passing bills that enrich and enable and empower the richest and most powerful people and those with the most agency. So unless we turn against that, you're only going to see more crises around the world, and not only as awful as it is in Gaza, but right here in the United States as well. If you want to join me, I'd love to talk to you. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. But I really don't, right now, honestly, I don't really have a lot of hope. I mean, we do not seem to see any real movement or any movement whatsoever by the, either party, by the Democrats certainly, to try to solve the problems we face. And at the same time, they're, to the extent that they're doing anything, largely making things worse. And that's certainly with respect to the border crisis as well. And in Israel. If you want to join me, I said 240-242-5646. Please click like. Please click subscribe. I want to get those, got to get those subscription numbers up, you know. That's how we can have influence, only with numbers in strength, or with numbers comes strength, or in numbers is strength, something like that. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Obviously, if we have hundreds of thousands of viewers, not that we do, but we live in hope, then maybe there will be some changes. That said, there are hosts like Jimmy Dore who, by and large, do talk a good progressive game, and yet we're not seeing the Democratic Party. You know what what the Democratic Party does is everything possible to marginalize progressive voices, to dismiss them, to cancel them. So all we can do is just keep raising our voices, and in the end, not vote for the regressives in both parties, not vote for the regressives who control both parties. I wanted just to show the numbers again, because this is right now the moral crisis of our time. There are other crises we face. I think the immigration crisis is obviously a very serious one. I know that from my wife, who teaches English as a second language, or English to speakers of other languages, however you want to call it. And that is very serious. People coming to this country with virtually nothing. They are putting a burden. I know this is what a lot of that grandstanding in Congress by both parties is about, the immigration crisis at the border. We do need to address it, and we need to do so in a humane way to make sure that everyone who is here has enough. And not only that, the people who want to come here are treated humanely, are treated with respect, are treated with decency, and ultimately they too, we do everything we possibly can to make sure they also have enough. That's not trust me, Congress that's not the game Congress is playing. They're not about making sure we all have a decent life. Far from it. And that's true in both parties. But just sticking in Gaza. So this is the latest figures as of yesterday. I said close to 30,000 dead there. You see 27,585 in Gaza. That's Gaza. That doesn't include the West Bank, where Israel's also been killing Palestinians. And you can see of that number, close to 20,000 are women or children. Maybe a few of the women are Hamas militants, but we know that Israel has not come anywhere close to eliminating Hamas. Anthony Blinken admitted maybe 30%. And of course, however many Hamas militants they capture or kill, that is, Israel does, many more will be rushing to take their place after their suffering from Israel's genocidal acts and their rampage West Bank. So close to 20,000 children and women killed, 67,000 reported injured, and many missing as well. This is the deadliest war on a daily basis of the 21st century. So that includes Ukraine, which is an incredibly deadly war. And yet Israel is killing Palestinians and Gazans at an unprecedented rate for this millennium. So if you care about that, I think you probably care that our Congress doesn't care, right? I mean, that's would seem to be a litmus test. If you're into litmus tests, like, do you support reproductive rights? I mean, that's a litmus test. Do you believe in the climate cataclysm? Are you for reparations? Those are litmus tests that many people impose. So my litmus test is, are you going to do something to stop Israel from killing women, children, and men, the great majority of whom have nothing to do with Hamas? We saw the numbers from Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, 383 people killed by Israel, 100 children, 4,250 injured. Israel has suffered too. I don't want to pretend that there's no deaths in Israel. Let's get to that number here. This is all from Al Jazeera. I don't think there's really, people often say, well, you're believing Al Jazeera. Why do you believe Al Jazeera? No one's questioning the numbers. Israel doesn't even really deny the numbers that Al Jazeera puts out there. They just sort of say things like, well, how can you believe Al Jazeera, without providing or proposing or suggesting other numbers or explaining why we shouldn't believe Al Jazeera, which does have journalists on the ground. So with 28,000 or so Palestinians dead since October 7th, Israel, meanwhile, has revised its death toll down a relatively significant number from 1,405 to 1,139. So about 266, if my math is correct, fewer deaths. And that is about, decent percentage of the total number of dead, 15% or so. So not to minimize the suffering in Israel, none the least, just to point out that even if you somehow believe in an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, do you believe in 20 eyes? Because that's how many people, Israel's killed 28,000 Palestinians since October 7, and they've lost about 1,140. So I don't know. Do you believe in 22, 23, 24 eyes for an eye? Because that's how Israel has responded. Love to hear what you have to say. 240-242-5646. I believe that intelligence really is best measured by solving problems. How do you address problems that we face, that you face? Can you solve them? Here's a little digression for you that I've been getting into it with Jeff on occasion, and quite, many occasions over the years, because what he does clearly, and you can see this in some of his posts, is watch my live stream, which I really appreciate, Jeff. Thank you. And he listens bound and determined to find something he thinks I got wrong, and then to say, you got this wrong, you're wrong about this. Where do you come off saying this? It's not about solving problems. So I talk about genocidal acts by Israel. I want us to figure out how, if possible, by collective action, we can stop them. Talk about people sleeping under bridges. How do we solve those problems? Jeff is about trying to, poke holes in my solutions. That's not solving the problem. So I talk a lot about tax policy and raising taxes. And mostly my focus is on much higher income taxes. And I think someone's calling me. So let me see if I can get him on. Here we go. John, we'll get to you. John, I appreciate your call. We'll get to you in just a second. But I just wanted to make this point here about solving problems. So I talk about how we need tax policy to guarantee everyone has enough and nobody has too much. Seems to me those are solving two problems, right? Problems of massive income and wealth inequality, a tiny number of people controlling 50% or so of the nation's wealth, and then half the country with no wealth whatsoever. So how do we address that? Well, with sound tax policy. I talk about estate tax. I talk about income tax. I mentioned the wealth tax, which is not my favorite tax, but given how skewed wealth is now, I support it. So Jeff's view is, or he believes he's got me there because according to him, there's no constitutionality to a wealth tax. Well, I looked into this and, I don't know that it's ever been definitively ruled on, but many tax proponents, tax analysts believe it is constitutional. Maybe it isn't. But if you're going to say, well, Hal, that's not constitutional, that's not a solution, that's fine. Because if we're about solving a problem, then we have to make sure that the solution will work, is workable, is viable. And maybe it's true. And I would certainly not put it past this Supreme Court to hold unconstitutional a wealth tax, a tax on wealth while someone's alive. After all, it is a double tax because you were taxed on the income, you were taxed if you inherited it. So maybe that would be deemed unconstitutional. Fine, that's your view. That your answer is your solution is not going to be a wealth tax. Well, what is it? I don't think anyone really could dispute that the wealth is far too concentrated into too few hands, and too many people have nothing. I don't think anyone could really argue that's the way it is right now. So what is your solution? If you're going to say, I don't think we can do a wealth tax, but this is what we could do. Yeah, you're right about the estate tax. Yeah, you're right about the income tax. And yeah, by the way, maybe we should start many more antitrust suits against integrated corporations. By breaking those up, we would be spreading the wealth around, which we also need to do. So if you want to take issue with some of my solutions, fine. Tell me why they're not going to work. One possible reason is what you said, Jeff. It's not constitutional to have a wealth tax. Okay, so then what do you propose? And I promise you we can have a discussion. But simply saying, well, this didn't work and you don't answer a question, that's not a dialogue. That's not how we progress. John, I wanted to get to you there. Good morning. Thank you for your patience. I know it's morning on the left coast. What's up? By the way, did you get flooded out? Are you like on a little raft, a wooden log raft somewhere in the Salinas River?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay. It was, well, how much rain did you, was it an unprecedented amount of rain like the LA Times said they were going to get in Los Angeles?
Los Angeles got a lot of the rain. We got quite a bit and we got some wind. But as far as the tail of the atmospheric river, I believe that hit Los Angeles and San Diego or Orange County. They were like right in the middle of it. That's what I saw when I was looking on the radar. They got a lot of water, and we here mostly got pretty severe wind, like 100-mile-an-hour gusts, and
that's pretty strong. 100 miles per hour. I fear the old KRXA antenna would be in the Pacific Ocean right about now had it still been affixed to the roof last week.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Hey, can I talk about the wealth tax?
Yes, that would be great. I brought it up, so please do.
Yeah, I think it's the only way to prevent snowballing wealth, and snowballing wealth is really a detriment to everybody because it's when you accumulate as much wealth as some individuals and corporate entities have, you basically have gained control over all of society. And if those people happen to be malevolent, they've essentially weaponized their fortunes against, people. And they kind of have an incentive to do that if they want to get richer because, well, that's how the system works, is they need, in order for the economic engine to keep turning, they need lots and lots of people who are in dire need of just the basic necessities. That's really kind of the whip that they're cracking over our back right now. And if all of a sudden the American people had more time off, you would see some, stagnation in GDP or even some negative growth, but that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. And especially if the government were the employer of last resort, where people could, have a safety net to fall into, and they could, figure out how to reallocate manpower and jumpstart an economy again. That's kind of their job. But the wealth tax, I can't think of any part of the Constitution that would outlaw a wealth tax and not an income tax or a sales tax or some other sort of taxes. And in fact, the Constitution does say that Congress has the power to levy taxes. Isn't that Article 1, Section 8?
I should know that. I have no idea which article, but I'm certain you're absolutely right. Congress shall have the power to levy taxes. And, I didn't read closely, not John, but Jeff's argument. You're John. I think he was saying that the taxes have to be narrowly tailored to serve some purpose, which I've never heard that either. But I would say, given the makeup of this Supreme Court, I wouldn't be surprised if they jury rigged some, major stretch from some dubious decision from, 1812 that somehow they would say made it illegal to impose a wealth tax. But, again, what's your point? Okay, well, maybe the Supreme Court would say that. So then what else do we do? Obviously, there are many other ways to get at this, including higher income taxes, including higher estate taxes, top marginal rates. That said, I think it's the right move at this juncture because the inequality is so tremendous, and you do have these characters like Musk and Bezos and Bill Gates, whose decency is certainly in question. Their concern for other people is in question. And even if it weren't, so what? Even if they were the most wonderful, saintly people in the world, they still shouldn't be able to. We just shouldn't allow it. We just should not allow that.
It's no different than allowing people to have very dangerous weapons, that can harm a lot of
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. 100%. That's a great point.
That's really,
a great point. Hey, listen, before, let me just move on with you though. Are you I know we disagree very vociferously, very vehemently on Ukraine, but I hope, but I'm asking maybe, and your opinion's your opinion. Are you as upset and outraged as I'm at Congress's abject failure to rein in Israel and basically and the Democrats are all in trying to get Israel more money despite their paying lip service to the idea of, some kind of a ceasefire?
Last I heard last night on NPR that the vote to fund Israel, give them $17 billion, did not pass in the House. Was that not correct?
Yes, but it did not pass because of Republican opposition. The Republican opposition was based on the fact that it wasn't that I don't know that they really cared so much about that, but that this was all tied to the border security bill.
But they weren't tied together. I'm pretty sure that it was a standalone. It was a standalone bill to fund, to give Israel $17 billion. It did not include border security. That was in the House. Are you thinking about what's going on in the Senate?
I'm thinking about what's going on in the House. Let me get you that video up, John, just a second, because I have a video on this, or I hope I do. Actually, now I'm concerned I don't. I may have. Let me see if I don't have the video available in this moment. I'm going to see if I can get it. But I put it together earlier. I'm going to see if I can get this now. There was the bill that went down was specifically, as I understand it, targeted to the border and Ukraine-Israel funding. Let me see if I can get that for you. But it was quite a. Here we go. So let me see. This is not the exact video I was hoping to play, but I think it will pretty much make the same point with Tapper and I don't know who the other guy is, but this is from yesterday, and this was actually at the moment when they were debating it. So see if we can get this up here. Just play with the boxes a little bit for everybody. See what Tapper and his guest have to say. But yeah, it was the Senate Republican. This is Senate Republicans, but also the House too, I believe, did the same thing. They didn't want the money go to. So here we go. Let's get this on.
There's two things a young man want to be.
We'll get there in just a moment, John. Your understanding is that the Republicans just said we don't want a standalone bill, period?
Well, here's what I'm reading in USA Today. The House failed to pass over $17.6 billion in assistance to Israel on Tuesday. It's a blow to House Speaker Mike Johnson's attempts to kill the Senate's sweeping bipartisan deal that would tie foreign aid to changes in border and migrant policy. The bill failed by a vote of 250 to 180. So there were Democrats there. Let's see. The legislation faced fierce opposition from multiple corners of the lower chamber and required significant bipartisan support as Republican leaders put the bill under suspension. A procedural tactic that fast tracks a bill for a vote but requires 2/3 support to pass. So lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have long called for additional aid to Israel as its war with Hamas rages on in the Middle East, but some House Republicans and Democrats and some Senate lawmakers still raise concerns about the latest push. Many progressives who voted against the bill cited Israel's continued offensives in Gaza, calling for stronger human rights protections in the region. Other Democrats voted against the bill in favor of a bipartisan package that would also provide aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, hard-right conservatives knocked the bill because it doesn't contain a specific provision to pay for the billions in aid. Billions in aid for what?
So basically what the Democrats tried to do, as I understand it, is tie border security to aid for Ukraine and Israel, hoping that Republicans would go along with the bill because they want border security, or because because they don't want a border bill. They want Israel and Ukraine because they wanted to put them in a box and say you've got to vote for this bill because you want more war money for Ukraine and Israel. And the GOP said, no, we're not going to do that because we're not going to buck Trump, who doesn't want a border bill. But they definitely are pushing the Democrats and Biden specifically and the Democratic leadership. Sure, there are some progressive Democrats who are saying no, but basically Democratic leadership is all in for more funding for Israel. And it was Republicans who torpedoed the bill more than even Democrats. That's certainly what the report was that I read, I guess from ABC. Let me see if I can play this video here. This is Tapper. Let's see if he gives us a little.
It sounds like they got about 35 Democrats to oppose it. About 35.
Well, partly they opposed it also, John. It was a terrible bill. And I'll have the video. Unfortunately, can't get it to you right now. But it was a terrible bill because it also, the immigration aspects were very draconian as well. People were saying, oh, these were good. But they authorized the president, for example, to just simply close the border. So I guess they're building the wall. Just say, oh, no, nobody else gets to come in. There were aspects of the bill that authorized surveillance of immigrants that many libertarians and civil rights advocates opposed. And again, it did include all that help for Israel. So really, you see both sides, I think, just voting incorrectly, just voting wrong, voting for more money for terrible things.
I don't think it sounds so draconian for the president to be able to close the border if he deems it necessary.
How are you going to close the border? Is he going to build another wall? Is he going to build a wall after
barriers
all?
are part of it, but a more robust customs, or not customs, but the border patrol. We need more border patrol agents, from like tens of thousands more.
There's all this pressure building to come into the country because of American policies that are making life miserable in the rest of the world. And that's what we need to address.
Well, there's an order in which we need to address these problems. If you address them out of order, you get a catastrophe.
I agree. So I agree with that, by the way. It is really bad. We do need to do something about the border crisis. I don't disagree with you. And I mentioned that our schools and our institutions are being overrun. But I don't think either party is seriously addressing this.
Yeah, I don't really, at this point, I'm not willing to blame both sides. I at least, Biden is at least handing an olive branch to the people who are really freaking out about the border, in the fact that he continued Trump's policy of being able to keep the border shut for health reasons. I guess that was how Trump finally was able to close down the border as much as he did. It was COVID. the Biden administration continued those policies and continued defending that policy. And that is him reaching out and attempting to be everyone's president, because he knows there are people who have major concerns about the border. So it's I don't know. I guess.
Well, I'll just add this then, John. If that's correct, and I'm not totally going to argue that point, because I do agree we need a border bill, and I do agree with you that there's, this is a complex issue, very much so. But if you really wanted a serious effort to get a border bill through, why are you tying it to aid to Israel and Ukraine? I think that a serious border bill would be in some way. Now, I know that the Republicans would probably vote against it because Trump's telling them to. Would every House Republican vote against it? I'm not so sure. Some House Republicans, for example, voted against impeaching Mayorkas. And that impeachment is based purely on his alleged failure to enforce the law when it comes to the immigrants coming across the border right now. So I don't know that a standalone. You correctly. Say again.
If I understand you correctly, you're saying why include things in a bill that obstructionists oppose? And I think the answer to that is that they're not supposed to be obstructionists. They're supposed to be compromising.
No, I'm saying they're bad things. I'm saying we shouldn't be giving Israel aid. I'm saying we shouldn't be providing any aid to Israel whatsoever. So if you really are serious about wanting to have a border bill passed, why are you putting in all this money for Israel that we shouldn't be giving them? And in my opinion, as well, why are you putting in money for Ukraine that we also shouldn't be giving?
We should be giving money to Ukraine.
Well, you and I 100% disagree on that one, but I think we agree that, and even if we should be, which I don't think we should be, they shouldn't be in a bill that has to do with the border.
I don't think that you understand the significance of preventing fascists from taking over large swaths of very valuable land. This is how they
talking about Ukraine?
They move on.
I'm talking about Ukraine?
That's exactly what. That's right. I'm talking about an autocratic fascist regime taking over a very large swath of land that will increase their wealth and enable them to move on to their next very large swath.
It's hardly increase their wealth, and that swath of land you're talking about is basically rubble. The land has been completely laid waste to. And that said, again, if you want to stomp it, why aren't you proposing discussions, negotiations? I know the argument always is, they said no. They said no. They wouldn't negotiate before. Well, so keep trying. Why not keep trying? Anything has got to be better than right now what we're seeing.
I think things are going to be looking up for them soon. They have not received any F-16s yet. The significance of the F-16 is that it carries a payload, basically an air-to-surface missile that has a range of 300 to 500 kilometers. And the significance of that is that puts all of Russia's supply chain infrastructure in range. The bridge, all the railroads that they get their stuff in on, the roads. When they get those F-16s, they are going to be able to begin a siege on the Russians. They're going to be able to hit their ships in the Black Sea. It's going to be a game changer.
All right. Well, we've heard this before. That's what they were saying. The offensive, the summer offensive, was going to be a game changer. And that said, the presupposition of all of that is that this is great. We want to see Ukraine totally destroy Russia, as though Ukraine is some kind of avatar of freedom and democracy, which it isn't at all. There are many concerns about corruption in Ukraine, about the lack of freedom in Ukraine, and we're to a very significant degree responsible, John. I just can't share your enthusiasm for ongoing ever more death and destruction in that part of the world.
You got to get your story straight. The reason the Russians are invading is because Ukraine is trying to do something about that corruption. They're being seriously considered right now to join the European Union, And one of the requirements of doing that is getting, all the corruptos out of your government. And the European Union is taking them seriously on this right now. They're in the process of doing that. I don't know why you don't give them credit for that.
Look, I mean, this is one area, there's just simply not going to be any meeting of the minds. I'm not going to accept that somehow the EU is an exemplar of clean government. Far from it. Look, Turkey, is Turkey not in the EU? Maybe it is, and I'm not sure. They've certainly been considered for it. So there's plenty of problems in the EU as well.
Turkey was considered. No, Turkey had advocates. 20 years ago they tried to join, and they basically said no. Turkey had too many problems. They had too many issues with their government. Right. And they're not a part of Europe, which
Well, that's for sure true.
Yeah.
Actually, Turkey. Yeah, there's some questions. They're part of the EEC. There's sort of a. In any event, obviously, whether Ukraine is or is not making a serious effort to address the corruption in its country, there are very serious problems in Ukraine. It is not an exemplar of democracy whatsoever. And a large reason for the war right now is because Russia wants a buffer. Russia doesn't want NATO on its doorstep. We were pushing discussions for Ukraine to join NATO. We kept pushing it, and this aggravated and antagonized Russia. Now, you want to say that they shouldn't have been antagonized and they should have welcomed it? Fine. That's not what happened. That's not the way it works. There are people dying right now. It's a bloody conflict.
We don't have to twist anybody's arm to get them into NATO. They want to join.
Okay. Well, if you're the leader of a country and you're if you're the leader of the country and you perceive that you personally will benefit from joining NATO, then maybe you do it. But I don't think that the several million Ukrainians who are facing ever more serious privations as a result are particularly pleased right now. And they most certainly are not. In fact, you can't criticize, just like you can't be anti-war against Gaza. In Gaza, you can't be anti-war against Russia and Ukraine. John, I'm going to.
Hal, let me just one more example. I don't think that Ukrainians feel that they're being imposed upon by their own government by being sent to the front. There was a world champion bodybuilder, strongman from Ukraine. He ranked really high up there. He was famous. He had a lot to live for. He volunteered to go to the front. He just died the other day. He died in combat, but he was there because he wanted to be. He had the resources to avoid that if he wanted to. And there are Ukrainians believe in this war. They want to drive Russia out. They want their children back. They want to. They don't want to just.
Well, I think they want their children back from the front. And I think if they want their children back from Russia, the way you get them back is you negotiate, you figure out a peace, and you get there. And if Ukraine really wants to fight the war, I'm not going to say they shouldn't fight it. What I'm going to say is we shouldn't be giving our treasure to perpetuate this endless war. That's what I'm saying. Endless war that, by the way, is profitable for many U.S. businesses.
It's our money now or our blood later. We can take our money now, or we can take our soldiers later.
That's what we heard. That's what we heard about the Middle East too. Was that we have to fight them over there, so we don't fight them over here, and it's only meant more death, more destruction, and probably more American lives.
The Ukrainians are fighting them over there. It's our money now, or our soldiers later. We're not fighting over there right now.
All right, John, I appreciate it.
In Iraq, that was a different story.
I appreciate the call, John. Thanks, really do. And hope you'll call back again. We're not going to agree on this. And even if I did agree that we should be funding Ukraine, that doesn't mean that Biden should be putting money for Israel in a bill that addresses the border and border security. All right, I want to get this clip in because this is one of my least favorite Congress members. And I think he really does, again, show why, Americans are so disgusted with both parties and find both parties to be, just acting and childishly. And it's really kind of funny because you'll see in the clip, the guy who puts this up there, Brian Tyler Cohen, he's a Democratic shill of the worst sort. He has huge popularity. I mean, I would never kill, but I would love to have the numbers he has. Again, I don't get it. It's just depressing. It's disheartening to me that this kind of propaganda, this overt pro-Democratic Party, not pro-America, not pro-solving problems, but just a guy who's just there gloating and glee. And by the way, wears a very tight tailored suit as well, that this somehow is what you want? Really? Let's see if we can get this going here.
Green. So first off, here's what Green said only days ago while advocating for Secretary Mayorkas's impeachment.
This historical evidence is overwhelming that the founding fathers intended impeachment to be used to deal with the commission of indictable crimes and the abuse of power.
All right, so let me stop it right there. So this goes to this Homeland Security Secretary who, in this grandstanding absurdity by the Republicans, is being impeached. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, clearly, I mean, I hate to say this, not the brightest bulb in the drawer, not the most educated person. She says they're indictable. And of course, Raskin's going to pick up on this. But he is so unlikable in his response that I almost have sympathy for her. Again, this is Congress playing games. The Republicans are playing games by trying to this stupid impeachment against Mayorkas, but Raskin plays right along with them and I believe very strongly embarrasses himself and comes up like a complete butthole.
Corruption and injury to the nation caused by public officials, among others.
And now here's Jamie Raskin's response on the House floor.
All right, so the guy has very tight suits. I guess that's the style. I don't know. But I noticed this too, the humiliate. See how in his title, Cohen there has that like this is, we're owning them. Like that's our win. With a brutal, in caps, takedown. Not we're solving a problem. Not we're addressing the border crisis. Not we're addressing the issues that have led to so many people seeking refuge in the United States, even though we're very inhospitable to them, even though we treat the immigrants badly in many ways. Nevertheless, life is so horrible in the global South with deprivation, hunger, crime, often American caused, that they're coming here. No one's talking about that. No one seems to care about that. What we're talking about is humiliating and brutal takedowns. It's just awful. And this guy's got a huge following, 2.5 million subscribers. That seems to be what people want. Not a conversation, not solutions, not a discussion, just humiliations and brutal takedowns. By the way, does Raskin really humiliate and brutally take her down, or does he humiliate himself?
For all of Congress to see.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Chairman, we're here because
look at that smirk he's got. I mean, that just drives me so crazy. And I made it. This is such a failure of our institutions. There are genocidal acts. What is genocide? It feels like genocide right now in Gaza, doesn't it? The starvation, the dehydration, the killing that's at historic levels right now. And this guy is yucking it up on the floor of the Senate and of the House. And in support of a bill, by the way, that would include more funding for Israel.
Wild goose chase to impeach Joe Biden has produced no wild geese. Even Fox News is lampooning the fact.
And you know, this was because he's harking back. He's saying, oh, you couldn't get Biden on corruption charges arising out of Hunter Biden. So now you're going after Mayorkas because of the border. Well, that's not completely false. But it's also not true that there's nothing on Biden. Biden did aid and abet to a degree his son's corrupt activities around the globe. Biden did get on the phone with investors to suggest that, yes, if you invest with my son, if you give him money, you'll get something out of it. And it really looks bad. And Biden and Raskin shouldn't be smirking it up. because of that. And also Raskin shouldn't be smirking for that reason. He also shouldn't be smirking because he led a failed impeachment charge after Trump was out of office. An impeachment charge that made the Democrats look bad. That was a distraction from the Democratic failure to address the genuine needs of the American people, to take on the plutocrats that control his party. And he should also not be smirking because he's been all in, including taking money from the war machine to perpetuate endless carnage in Ukraine.
That their own expert witnesses repeatedly say President Biden did nothing wrong and there are no grounds for impeachment. More than a dozen GOP members in Biden majority districts don't want to go anywhere near that fantasy production. So the Trump-Putin mega faction headed up by the distinguished gentlelady.
I love that. So right there, the Trump-Putin mega faction. Now, we know that there was zero evidence connecting Trump and Putin. That's just not the case. But it's the way Raskin, who is carrying water for the military-industrial complex for Lockheed Martin, tries to generate more, gin up more support for the bill that includes billions more for funding and perpetuating carnage in Ukraine. Because look, Putin is Trump, Trump is Putin, so we've got to keep killing Russians, right? That's your argument, I suppose, Raskin? Is that it? Or that's why the Republicans are against it, because they're really in league with Russia. I mean, it's so juvenile, and please don't fall for it. Please don't fall for it. There just wasn't any evidence. The impeachment against Trump was just as, the first one especially, alleging some sort of conspiracy to win using Russian aid was completely, in 2016, was just nothing. It was a complete nothing burger. It was as trumped up, as phony, as fallacious as the Republican impeachment of Mayorkas. So how Raskin is being pure partisan hack, grandstanding. You know, yeah, he's glib. He used a few words. A wild goose chase didn't turn up any geese. But in the end, he's as empty as the suit of this guy that putting this video up.
From Georgia has been given this worthless trinket of a consolation prize, the opportunity to bring a slapstick impeachment drive against a cabinet member of unimpeachable integrity who has obviously committed no treason, no bribery, no high crimes, no misdemeanors, nothing indictable or even indictable.
All right, so there he's like, oh, see, you said indict instead of indict. See, now the kind of person who does that, there's a word for them. I'm sitting on it right now. That's the kind of person who acts the way Jamie Raskin acts there. And I think most Americans will understand and feel viscerally the contempt that he has. Look, I'm not saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is any great person by any means, but she's in many ways a lot more like many Americans than this Harvard law educated professor. And you can just feel the contempt he has for her and for Republicans and for working class people dripping. Oh, people who think the word is indict, not indict. This is why Democrats lose. I mean, their policies are terrible, but also they clear the arrogance that you see displayed by this guy. Just, it makes people hate them.
If you prefer.
The extent to which Marjorie Taylor Greene is so out of her depth when it comes to Jamie Raskin cannot be overstated. And by the way, Raskin knows it too, which is why he's actually begun toying with Greene. And
see, and this is not what Americans want. Oh, we're toying. There are real problems. John said it. There are real problems at the border. Raskin couldn't give a fat rat's butt about solving those problems. It's just, oh, I got to toy with Marjorie Taylor Greene. How much fun that is.
Not exactly seeing the humor in it.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Will the gentlelady yield for a question?
No, I will not yield to one of your stupid questions that are always attacking me and attacking President Trump.
How about
And by the way, when she says that, I'm like, yes, because you aren't about solving problems, Raskin. You aren't about trying to come up with something that might work. You're just about score settling, grandstanding, just like your impeachment of Trump after he was out of office. What were you even thinking? He wasn't in office. You impeach him. You knew you were going to lose anyway. What were you trying to get out of that? I'll tell you what he got out of it. He got a distraction from what we American people wanted and what could have possibly worked, a bipartisan bill for health, bipartisan coalition, maybe not a bill, but to build a multiracial, multi-ethnic, intra-class coalition. But he doesn't care about that. He just cares about score settling and making little jokes.
No, I don't want to. I do not.
A mediocre question. It's just, I kind of feel dirty, playing this guy. I mean, that's who he is. And what's the most painful thing out of all of this for me is that Jamie Raskin is really popular in his district. And the people that I have worked with think he's a good Congress member and think he's doing the people's business when he most emphatically is not. If you were doing the people's business, you're building a multi-racial, multi-ethnic coalition that will reduce wealth and income inequality and guarantee that all have enough and none have too much. All right, I am going to call it a show. I had some other videos I want to play, but I left them on the other hard drive. I should get to those tomorrow, I hope. I also really want to talk a little bit more about Jamel Bouie from the New York Times and why I believe he also, like Raskin, is failing us, and why journalists, and politicians, especially on the left, have just abrogated their responsibility to the people of this country. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you join me. Please don't forget, click like, click subscribe.